First story, by Sarah Wilson. The air was heavy with an approaching thunderstorm as I settled into my old, creaking house in the quiet town of Brookside, Vermont. My husband, Daniel, had been away on a business trip for the week, leaving me home alone. I wasn't too keen on the idea, but he had assured me that I would be fine. As I sat in the living room, the flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the walls, a sense of unease settled upon me. The storm outside grew more violent, with thunder booming and lightning slicing through the sky. The wind howled, making the trees in our backyard groan and sway. I had always been a bit jittery during thunderstorms, and this one was no exception. I tried to distract myself with a book, but the noises from outside and the persistent creaks and groans of the old house only heightened my anxiety. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping at the window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The tapping continued, like someone was gently rapping their knuckles against the glass. I mustered the courage to approach the window and peek outside. The storm made it difficult to see, but I couldn't discern anything unusual. Uneasy, I retreated to the safety of the living room, but the tapping persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Trembling, I picked up the phone and called Daniel, telling him about the mysterious tapping. He tried to calm me down, suggesting it might be a tree branch or some debris being blown by the wind. I wanted to believe him, but the tapping didn't sound like that. It sounded deliberate, like someone was trying to get my attention. As I stayed on the line with Daniel, the tapping abruptly stopped, leaving me in silence. I began to relax, thinking that maybe he was right. Perhaps it had been a tree branch. I chuckled at my own unease. Just as I was about to hang up the phone, I heard a new sound. Footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, and my blood ran cold. I whispered to Daniel what I was hearing, my voice barely louder than a breath. He told me to lock myself in the bathroom and call the police immediately. The footsteps grew closer, and I did as he said, locking myself in the small bathroom, the phone clenched in my trembling hand. I whispered to the dispatcher about the intruder in my home, my words barely audible over my racing heart. The footsteps stopped outside the bathroom door, and I held my breath, straining to hear any sign of the intruder. There was a long, unbearable silence, and then the doorknob began to turn slowly. My heart felt like it was going to explode. The door creaked open, and my eyes widened in terror. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, obscured by the dim light of the hallway. I screamed, and the figure lunged toward me. The phone clattered to the floor, and the dispatcher's frantic voice echoed in the background as I grappled with the intruder. I fought with everything I had, kicking and biting, until I managed to break free. I ran out of the bathroom and out of the house, still screaming for help. The police arrived moments later, and they apprehended the intruder. It turned out to be a man who had been watching our house, waiting for an opportunity to break in. As they led him away in handcuffs, I realized how fortunate I was to have escaped that horrifying encounter. The storm still raged outside, but the terror that had invaded my home was finally over. Second story, by Jake Anderson. It was a balmy summer evening in the quiet suburban town of Crestwood, Colorado. I was home alone, as my wife was visiting her family for the weekend. I decided to unwind by watching a movie in our cozy living room. The movie played on the TV, and I settled into the soft embrace of our sofa, a bowl of popcorn in hand. The house was quiet, and the only light came from the flickering screen. As I lost myself in the film, A strange noise echoed through the room, a faint scratching sound. I paused the movie and listened intently. The noise was coming from above, from the attic. My heart began to race, and I tried to rationalize it, thinking it might be an animal or a bird that had somehow gotten inside. I had heard of such things happening in the past. With a flashlight in hand, I reluctantly made my way to the attic access in the hallway. I climbed the wooden ladder and shined the light around. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then I caught a glimpse of movement in the far corner. I focused the light in that direction and saw a pair of eyes staring back at me. They were not the eyes of an animal, but a person. My heart leaped into my throat, and I shouted in a panic, "Who are you?" The intruder remained silent but slowly emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, disheveled and wild-eyed, with dirt-streaked skin and torn clothing. She looked as if she had been living in the attic for some time. I took a step back, my mind racing with fear and confusion. How had she gotten in? What did she want? I had so many questions, but I knew I needed to get her out of the house. I cautiously descended from the attic and called the police. They arrived quickly and took the woman into custody. She was disoriented and appeared to be suffering from a mental illness. As I watched the police car pull away, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. How had she managed to enter the attic without me noticing? What had she been doing up there all that time? My wife returned home the next day, and I shared the chilling story with her. We had our attic secured, but the memory of the woman living above us still haunted my thoughts. Crestwood, a peaceful town, had revealed a world of unsettling mystery that I would never forget. Third story, by Laura Mitchell. It was a cool, overcast afternoon in the quaint town of Millville, New Jersey, and I found myself home alone. My husband had left for a work conference, leaving me to enjoy the solitude of our charming old farmhouse. I relished the peace and quiet, and I intended to spend my day reading in the cozy library. As I settled into the armchair, the gentle rain began to tap on the windowpane, creating a soothing background for my reading. The house was as quiet as a tomb, and I reveled in the solitude. It was the perfect setting for escaping into the pages of a good book. However, as I lost myself in the story, a strange noise interrupted my reading. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound coming from the hallway. I strained my ears to listen, and the noise grew louder, a faint scratching, as if someone were tracing their fingernails along the walls. My heart quickened, and I tried to attribute the noise to some logical explanation. Maybe it was a rodent in the walls or the old house settling. But the scratching continued, persisting in its eerie rhythm. I set my book aside and cautiously approached the hallway, my footsteps nearly silent on the wooden floor. The scratching sound was coming from behind a painting that hung on the wall. I reached for the painting and lifted it away, revealing a small hidden compartment in the wall. The compartment was just large enough for a hand to fit inside, and inside it, I found a series of letters. They were handwritten and dated from several decades ago. As I examined the letters, I realized they contained desperate pleas for help, recounting tales of a woman who believed she was being stalked. My mind raced as I read the chilling words. Who had hidden these letters in my home? And what had happened to the woman who had written them? My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, loud crash from the kitchen. I dropped the letters and rushed to the source of the noise. In the kitchen, I found the window shattered and rain pouring in, mingling with the shards of glass on the floor. Fear gripped me as I realized that someone had broken into the house. I didn't have time to ponder the letters or the hidden compartment. I needed to call the police immediately. I reached for my phone, but it was gone. The intruder had taken it. I was trapped in my own home, with a potential threat lurking somewhere within. I needed to make a quick decision. I fled the house through the back door and ran to the neighbors, pounding on their door in a frenzy. They called the police, who arrived promptly to investigate. The intruder had vanished, leaving behind a shattered window and a ransacked kitchen. The police questioned me about the letters, and I explained how I had discovered them. The investigation revealed that the letters had been written by a woman who had lived in the house many years ago. She had been the victim of a stalker who had tormented her until she disappeared without a trace. The letters had been hidden in the secret compartment as a desperate plea for help. The mystery of the hidden letters was solved, but the question of who had broken into my home and whether they were connected to the woman's disappearance remained unanswered. Millville, a peaceful town, had revealed a world of unsettling secrets that would forever haunt my thoughts. The investigation into the break-in continued, but the fear of the unknown lingered in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder that danger could be closer than we think, even within the safety of our own homes. Fourth Story, by Michael Thompson. It was a sweltering summer day in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Lakeside, Texas. My wife had taken our children to visit her parents for the weekend, leaving me home alone. I looked forward to having the house to myself for a few days. I decided to spend my Saturday catching up on household chores and getting some work done. As the afternoon sun blazed outside, I was in the home office, buried in paperwork. The air conditioner hummed, providing a welcome respite from the heat. As I focused on my work, I heard a faint, distant noise coming from the backyard. At first, I dismissed it as the wind or a neighbor's activity. But the noise grew louder and more distinct, a rhythmic tapping, like someone was gently knocking on the back door. I pushed my chair back and listened intently. I knew our neighborhood was safe, but the tapping was unsettling. I cautiously made my way to the back door and peered through the blinds. There, in the glaring sunlight, I saw a man standing on the patio. He was tall and had disheveled hair and an unshaven face. He wore a tattered shirt and had a vacant expression. What struck me as odd was that he was tapping his fingers on the glass, almost mechanically, as if he didn't even notice me watching him. I called out, "Can I help you?" The man didn't respond. He continued to tap on the glass with a vacant stare. My unease deepened, and I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police if necessary. I continued to ask the man questions, but he remained unresponsive. Just as I was about to dial 911, the man suddenly stopped tapping and turned to face me. His eyes locked onto mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. His gaze was empty and unsettling, as if he saw right through me. He began to mutter something under his breath, words I couldn't quite make out. It was an eerie, disjointed chant, and it sent a chill through my bones. I backed away from the door, my heart racing, and I heard him start to pound on the glass with his fists. With a sense of urgency, I dialed 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. I watched as the man continued to pound on the glass, his voice growing louder and more frenzied. He seemed to be in the throes of a disturbing episode. The police arrived within minutes, and they subdued the man, taking him into custody. I explained to them what had transpired, and they assured me that they would take care of it. As I watched the man being led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of dread. Lakeside, a peaceful suburban neighborhood, had revealed a world of unsettling encounters, leaving me with a reminder that even in the most tranquil settings, there could be moments of unexpected terror. Fifth Story, by Julia Hernandez. The sun was setting over the picturesque coastal town of Bayview, Oregon, casting a warm glow over the beachfront cottages. I was home alone, my partner away on a weekend camping trip with friends. I decided to take advantage of the solitude by having a relaxing evening by the ocean. I sat on the porch, gazing out at the waves crashing on the shore, sipping on a glass of wine. The sound of seagulls and the salt-scented breeze created a sense of tranquility. As the sky darkened, I lit a few candles to keep the porch aglow and continued to lose myself in the peaceful surroundings. That's when I heard it, a faint, mournful melody, like a haunting tune played on a harmonica. The music seemed to float on the evening air, carried by the sea breeze. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor playing music, but the melody had an eerie quality that sent shivers down my spine. I got up from my seat and followed the sound. The music seemed to be coming from the beach. I reached the water's edge and peered into the darkness. There, sitting alone on the sand, was a man in a tattered raincoat. He played the harmonica with an intensity that was both captivating and unsettling. I called out to him, asking if he needed help or if he was lost, but he didn't respond. He continued to play the mournful tune, the music wrapping around me like a ghostly specter. It was as if he were lost in his own world, oblivious to my presence. As I approached him, the man suddenly stopped playing and turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were dark and enigmatic, and he had an air of melancholy about him. I asked if he was okay, if he needed assistance, but his only response was to raise the harmonica to his lips once more. The eerie melody continued, and it sent shivers through my soul. I couldn't help but feel as though I had stumbled upon something otherworldly and unsettling. I took a step back, my heart pounding, and I watched as the man played the haunting tune, his eyes never leaving me. I decided it was best to return to the safety of my porch and call the local authorities. The police arrived, and they approached the man on the beach. He continued to play the harmonica, oblivious to their presence. The officers managed to coax the man into surrendering the harmonica and speaking with them. They informed me that he was a wanderer who had been known to frequent the town, playing his music on the beach. He was harmless, but his presence had a way of unsettling those who encountered him. As the man was led away, still playing his haunting tune, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bayview, a tranquil coastal town, held secrets that went beyond its picturesque facade. The eerie melody and the man's mournful eyes would continue to haunt my thoughts long after that evening. Sixth Story, by Samuel Foster. It was a bitter winter evening in the peaceful town of Foxborough, Massachusetts, and I was home alone, my wife away on a business trip. The old house creaked and groaned in the frigid night, creating an eerie symphony of sounds. I decided to unwind by having a relaxing soak in the bathtub, with a glass of red wine to warm my bones. The bathroom was dimly lit, and the steam from the hot water created an otherworldly atmosphere. I was submerged in a world of relaxation until I heard a faint, distant noise, a sound like soft weeping. I strained my ears to listen, and the weeping grew louder, like someone was sobbing in another room. My initial thought was that it might be the wind or a neighbor, but the sound was too close, too intimate. I reluctantly climbed out of the bathtub and wrapped a towel around myself. The weeping continued, leading me to the hallway. The sound seemed to be coming from the basement, where we rarely ventured. I had never heard such a noise in the house before. I descended the stairs with a sense of dread, the weeping growing more intense with each step. The basement was dark, and the only light came from the faint glow of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. There, in the corner of the basement, I saw a figure huddled on the floor. It was a woman, her body racked with sobs, her face hidden in her hands. She was dressed in tattered clothing, and her hair hung like a curtain around her. I called out, asking if she was okay and if she needed help. The woman didn't respond, her weeping growing more agonized. I took a cautious step closer, and that's when she raised her head. Her eyes were filled with despair, and she seemed to be looking right through me. She continued to weep, her voice like a haunting lament that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if she were trapped in a world of sorrow and couldn't escape. I reached for my phone, intending to call for assistance, but as I turned away for a moment, I heard the woman's voice whisper, "Don't leave me." My heart raced, and I turned back to her, my phone trembling in my hand. I asked if she needed help, and she repeated, "Don't leave me," in a trembling, desperate tone. It was as if she was pleading for solace, for someone to stay with her in her moment of despair. I felt a surge of compassion, and I approached her cautiously. I asked if she could tell me her name, but she didn't respond. Her weeping continued, and she seemed trapped in her own world of anguish. I tried to offer comfort, but it was clear that the woman was in the throes of an emotional crisis. I was uncertain how to help, so I called 911 and explained the situation. I stayed with the woman, trying to offer some form of solace while we waited for the police to arrive. When they did, they took the woman into their care, her weeping still echoing in the basement. The officers informed me that she had been a resident of Foxborough, but had gone missing a few years ago. Her reappearance was a mystery, and her emotional state left her unable to communicate or provide any information about her disappearance. As I watched the police car drive away with the woman, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of dread. Foxborough, a peaceful town, had revealed a world of unsettling mysteries and eerie encounters that went beyond the ordinary. The woman's weeping and her desperate plea not to be left alone would continue to haunt my thoughts, a reminder that even in the most serene places, there could be moments of unexpected and chilling encounters. Seventh Story, by Isabel Adams. The town of Greensburg, Pennsylvania, was known for its idyllic charm, and I relished the peace and tranquility it offered. It was a particularly cold winter's night, and my husband was away on a work trip, leaving me home alone. I decided to settle in for a cozy night, curling up with a good book in our spacious living room. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wood in the frigid air. The snow outside reflected the pale moonlight, creating an ethereal glow. As I read, I heard a soft, intermittent tapping on the window. I set my book aside and listened closely. The tapping continued, rhythmic and eerie, like someone was gently knocking on the glass. I got up from my comfortable chair and peered outside. There, on the snow-covered porch, was a figure, obscured by the frosty windows. It was a man, and he was tapping his fingers on the glass. His breath created frosty patterns on the window, and he seemed transfixed by the room inside. I asked who he was and what he wanted, but he remained silent. He continued to tap on the glass, his fingers leaving icy imprints. It was as if he were trying to communicate something, but his gaze was vacant, almost hypnotic. The tapping continued, and I felt a growing sense of unease. I considered calling the police, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was trying to convey something important. Perhaps he was lost or in distress. I decided to venture outside and confront the man, wrapped in a heavy coat and scarf to brace against the cold. As I opened the front door, the man turned to face me, his eyes empty and his lips moving in a whisper. He stepped closer, his breath visible in the frigid air, and he extended a hand toward me. I hesitated but eventually took his hand. It was icy cold, like death itself. The man guided me to the backyard, where he pointed to a spot in the snow. There, partially buried, was an old, weathered suitcase. He continued to whisper incomprehensible words, and I realized he was trying to tell me something about the suitcase. With a sense of trepidation, I bent down and opened the suitcase. Inside, I found a series of faded photographs and handwritten letters. They told the story of a lost love, of a man who had disappeared, leaving behind only memories and heartache. The man, still whispering, touched one of the photographs, and his eyes filled with longing. It was clear that he was the one in the photographs, the lost love who had vanished. I looked at him, understanding the heartbreak that had brought him to my doorstep. He had returned, unable to find peace until he had shared his story with someone who would listen. I realized that he needed closure, and I promised to share his story with the world, to ensure that his love story was remembered and his memory honored. As I returned to the house and began to write down his tale, I couldn't help but feel that Greensburg, a town known for its peaceful beauty, held stories and encounters that were beyond the ordinary. The man's whispering and his silent plea for recognition would remain etched in my memory, a testament to the power of lost love and the need for closure, even in the most serene places. 8th Story, by Brian Mitchell. The small town of Harmonyville, Vermont, was known for its tight-knit community and its serene, picturesque surroundings. My wife was away visiting her parents, leaving me alone in our cozy, countryside home. I had always loved the solitude of our little house, surrounded by towering trees and the soothing sounds of nature. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I decided to enjoy the quiet night by listening to my vinyl record collection. The soothing melodies filled the house, and I wrapped myself in a warm blanket, sipping on a glass of red wine. As I sat in the dimly lit living room, the soft crackling of the records was suddenly interrupted by a sound that sent shivers down my spine, a faint, whispering voice. I paused the record and listened carefully. The voice seemed to be coming from the hallway. I got up from my chair and followed the sound. The voice grew clearer, like someone was speaking softly, just out of earshot. It was an eerie and unsettling presence, especially in our remote countryside home. As I reached the hallway, the voice seemed to be coming from the closet. I opened the closet door, and there, standing in the darkness, was a man. He was hunched over, muttering to himself, his eyes vacant. I asked who he was and what he was doing in my house, but he didn't respond. He continued to mutter incoherently, his voice trembling and eerie. I felt a rush of fear and anger, and I demanded that he leave immediately. But the man remained unresponsive, lost in his own world. It was clear that something was seriously wrong with him. I decided to call the local authorities, explaining the situation as best as I could. As I waited for the police to arrive, I continued to watch the man, who seemed trapped in his own disturbing thoughts. When the police arrived, they managed to coax the man into leaving the closet and speaking with them. It was clear that he was suffering from a severe mental illness and had wandered into my home by chance. As I watched the police take the man into their care, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. Harmonyville, a town known for its tranquil beauty, had revealed a world of unsettling encounters and eerie moments that went beyond the ordinary. The man's haunting mutterings and his vacant eyes would continue to haunt my thoughts, serving as a reminder that even in the most peaceful places, there could be unsettling and unnerving encounters. Ninth Story by Rachel Turner. The quaint town of Greenfield, Indiana, was the epitome of a peaceful and idyllic community. I was home alone on a warm summer evening, as my husband was out of town for a business meeting. The house, with its creaking wooden floors and old-fashioned charm, was a haven of tranquility. I decided to spend my evening by watching a movie in the cozy living room, the soft glow of the TV illuminating the dimly lit space. I had just settled into the sofa with a bowl of popcorn when I heard a strange sound, a low, distant humming, like a soft melody. I paused the movie and listened. The humming continued, growing in intensity and eeriness. It was a tune that I couldn't quite place, but it filled me with a sense of unease. The sound seemed to be coming from somewhere within the house. I got up from the sofa and followed the sound. It led me to the basement, where the humming grew louder. The basement was dark, and the only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. There, in the dim light, I saw a figure seated on an old wooden stool, a musical instrument in hand. It was a man, his eyes closed in concentration, his fingers dancing across the strings of a guitar. The haunting melody he played seemed to have a life of its own, wrapping around me like a spectral shroud. I called out to him, asking who he was and what he was doing in my basement. The man didn't respond. He continued to play the haunting tune, his eyes still closed, as if he were lost in another world. I was filled with a sense of unease, and I asked again if he needed help or if he could explain himself. This time, the man slowly opened his eyes and looked at me. His gaze was distant and enigmatic, and he didn't utter a word. I decided to call the police, not knowing what to make of the eerie encounter. As I spoke to the dispatcher, the man continued to play the haunting melody, his music growing more intense and unsettling. The police arrived and managed to coax the man into surrendering the guitar. They informed me that he was a wanderer who had been known to travel through the town, playing his music in various locations. As the man was led away, still playing his haunting tune, I couldn't help but feel that Greenfield, a peaceful town, held stories and encounters that went beyond the ordinary. The eerie melody and the man's distant gaze would continue to haunt my thoughts, a reminder that even in the most tranquil places, there could be moments of unexpected and unsettling encounters. 10th Story by Robert Jensen. The rural town of Oakwood, Ohio, was known for its serene and quiet atmosphere. It was a typical summer evening, and I was home alone, as my wife had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. Our remote house nestled in the woods was the epitome of solitude. I decided to spend my evening on the back porch, enjoying the fresh air and the symphony of crickets and tree frogs. I sat in an old rocking chair, sipping on a glass of sweet iced tea as the sun dipped below the horizon. As I relaxed in the soothing embrace of nature, the evening was disrupted by a chilling sound, a distant, mournful howl. I had heard coyotes in the area before, but this was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The howling was mournful and eerie, sending a shiver down my spine. I listened as the howling grew louder and more insistent. It was as if a pack of these creatures was drawing closer to the house. My unease deepened, and I felt an ominous presence in the dark woods surrounding our home. I decided to retreat inside, locking the doors and windows for safety. The howling continued, growing more intense and unsettling. It seemed to surround the house, as if the creatures were closing in. I tried to call my wife to tell her about the eerie encounter, but there was no cell reception. I was alone, with only the unsettling howling for company. I considered calling the local authorities, but what could they do about a pack of coyotes in the woods? As I sat in the dimly lit living room, the howling outside reached a fever pitch. It was deafening, as if the creatures were right outside the windows. I felt trapped, a sense of dread washing over me. Just as I was about to make a run for the car and escape, the howling abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was eerie, and I felt an inexplicable sense of foreboding. I peered out the window, trying to see if the coyotes had moved on. But what I saw froze me in my tracks. In the moonlight, I saw figures moving in the darkness, not coyotes, but human shapes. They were cloaked in tattered rags, their eyes glinting in the pale light. The figures moved in an unsettling, slow procession, their feet shuffling along the ground. It was a sight that sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't fathom who these people were or what they were doing in the woods. I decided to call the police, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. The figures continued their eerie procession, disappearing into the woods as if they had never been there. The police arrived and searched the area, but they found no trace of the mysterious figures. They assured me that it was likely a group of people playing pranks in the woods, but their presence had left me with an unsettling feeling. As I locked the doors and windows once more, I couldn't shake the eerie encounter. Oakwood, a peaceful town, had revealed a world of unsettling mysteries and eerie moments that went beyond the ordinary. The chilling howling and the mysterious figures in the woods would continue to haunt my thoughts, serving as a reminder that even in the most serene places, there could be moments of unexpected and eerie encounters. Thank you for watching whole video. Check this video you see on the screen, it's one of my favorite. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that like to support my free and daily content for you. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment and tell me what story got you chills.